Hi everyone, thanks very much for listening in advance. A couple of things before I got here, I didn't realise that someone else had cleverly picked a very similar topic, so it's a little bit 2 for 1 tonight, but hopefully in a good way. Mine's perhaps more of a intro and the other one's a sort of retaliation in how it really should be maybe, but more on that later. I guess the other thing to mention is anyone who read the title of my talk earlier, it's been discreetly changed for obvious reasons if you read the earlier title, so please don't judge me. Right, let me just quickly add this. I guess developer to product is kind of the title of what I'm going to talk about, but it's more about sort of putting the elements of developer into product and kind of the other way around for the mutual benefit of both. So that's sort of the tone, and hopefully it's useful. I guess I had a quick question before I start, which is how many developers among you, well, I mean, I presume most of you are developers, but how many would sort of describe yourself as a product developer rather than a sort of pure developer? Okay, cool, good. Just sort of gauging how to pitch it. So, okay, I'll get going. I work at Bloom & Wild, so I guess that's the other bit of context. I'm Sharon, obviously. I'm head of product at Bloom & Wild, and what that means is that I'm sort of responsible for tech, UX, and product. When I tell you a bit more about what I think sort of product is, that will kind of make sense, but I'm probably a bit more tech than most product people. So, yeah. A little bit of background, Bloom & Wild, for anyone who doesn't know who Bloom & Wild is, which is probably most people because we're a really tiny startup. We are a florist essentially, but a kind of modern florist in that we use technology to make it easier to buy flowers and a bit nicer and a bit more cool, and actually makes the flowers a bit better as well because we speed everything up. We put them in boxes and they go through letterboxes. That's the kind of floral bit of it, which is not my specialism. And there's a whole load of technology behind the scenes that powers that. There's a website, which is a front end, probably front end interest more than the rest of it, which is a JavaScript app, an Angular single page app. That does the majority of our sales. It's sort of an e-commerce platform. We've got a Ruby API, Ruby on Rails API behind that, which is sort of sitting on top of various bits of technology that do things like deliveries, bookings, orders, and all the sort of tech inside the actual flower place where they put the boxes together. We've also got native apps for iOS and Android, so we've got quite a range of technologies. We've got 9 people in the tech team out of 25 in total, so we're actually quite a tech-focused business, but distinctly floral as well, as I'll try and communicate a little bit of perhaps as I go. Before that, I've worked for Zopa, which is a peer-to-peer lender, so much more techy. I've worked for Cancer Research, which is a charity. I've also worked for gov.uk and a bit further back in Australia for sort of maybe a bit of a lower level equivalent, City of Melbourne. So I've done all sorts of different sectors, but the consistent thing is the job of sort of products and tech. So I think I'm well-rounded, but I'll let you judge that. Okay, so I should have done that before. That's kind of what I just said, a bit about the tech team. I guess the thing I didn't mention actually is sort of a bit about our how we do tech at Bloom & Wild, which I think is, I think we do it pretty well. I probably would say that. The little sentence at the end is our kind of mantra, or I don't know what you want to call it, like our mission statement, coded with care, compiled with love, and shipped with pride. And it's a little bit a sort of a tech version of the Bloom & Wild statement, which I'm struggling to remember because I'm nervous, but it's a sort of techified version of that. And it basically means we really care about the code, we really care about the product, which is the flowers and the customer experience, and we really, that permeates through everything we do. We make sure the processes work for the people in the team. We make sure we pick and choose the right tools for the right reasons. The decisions we make kind of take these values into account. And that's definitely going to sort of permeate through the sort of tips or things that I'm going to talk about, which are around, how can you be more product focused if you're a developer and you want to, or how can you work more easily with product managers if that's what you want to do, or how can you understand product managers a bit more if that's your position as a developer. So firstly, what is product? If I'm teaching people to suck eggs, sort of wave at me or throw things at me, but I thought it was worth trying to explain it because it is a bit sort of mystical. It's kind of a lot of things, but bringing them together perhaps is the best way to describe it. You sort of sit in the middle of primarily things like UX, tech, and business, and by business I mean kind of hard goals, corporate numbers, that sort of stuff. I think everyone knows what UX and tech is, so I'm not going to talk about explaining that a bit more. Around those things, there's other things like marketing and operations and customer services and sort of flowers in our case and other things in other cases. They're all important too, and they're all part of it, but this is sort of the epicenter, and it's really about coordinating those things to get the best kind of product out at the end. To a greater or lesser degree, you probably focus on one of those things as a product manager. I think for me, if I was going to put myself on that diagram, I would be at the top between UX and tech. But obviously, I have to get the business bit as well. But if I had, if I had to pick a favourite, probably it would be the top two. What product is not is Gantt charts and project management and kind of traditional IT structures and all of those sorts of things. That's not my background. I've never worked in that kind of team. Those teams exist and they do great things in many instances, but it's not what I would describe as product. And I think quite often product managers probably struggle in that environment because it's quite different. It's quite regimented. You have very long lead times. You have very slow release cycles. You don't have any agility or any of the nice things that I've come to enjoy in the places that I've worked. So that's what I think product is, but very open to challenge on that. And anyone who wants to talk to me about product, I'll happily chat over beers for hours about it. So why should developers be interested in this? I mean, you have to work with them, right? So much as you hate product managers, if you do hate them, you have to work with them. So that's one sort of very kind of hard and fast reason. But some more positive reasons. You might be interested in it. You might be interested in becoming a product manager or doing a perhaps half and half job where you're a product developer maybe, or something that's sort of in between, or a UX engineer. I think the boundaries start to blur quite a lot when you sort of have interests and bring them into your role and have the freedom to do that. You might be a founder or a future founder. I think increasingly people learn to code because they want to start their own business, like it's happening everywhere, particularly in the startup scene. I feel like it's a massive trend. It might be different if you're not working in a startup, I don't know. But I think it's a massive thing at the moment. You could be a UX-focused developer, and I think particularly front-enders, like this is sort of almost obvious, right? You can't really avoid it if you're designing and building interfaces, like they're going to be used. So you have to be interested in it. Hopefully you're passionate about it as well. Again, perhaps on the negative side, you might be a bit fed up with being told what to do. You've got some project manager or maybe even a product manager who's saying, just do this, here's a spec, off you go. And actually you're thinking, well, I know the customers better, I know the product better, I know how to build this technology quicker, more efficiently, I can do it better. I think, fair play, try it. The final one, I guess, I sort of mentioned this already, actually, the two go together, I guess. If you feel like you're doing it better than the person who should be doing it, if you feel like you're doing it better than the person who is meant to be doing it, I think that can be a big motivating factor to go and perhaps dabble in the dark arts of product management. Again, I kind of mentioned this, but I think for front-enders, it's much more common. You're so much nearer to the product, to the kind of the usability, the purpose of it, the customers, the bits that they actually use, the buttons they click, whether it's, whatever that kind of interaction layer is. So I've got 10 slides now, 10 things that I think you could look into if you wanted to learn more about product in any of those for any of those reasons that I just mentioned, or to any of those degrees. So the first one is the roadmap, which I think is kind of everywhere. Like there's always a roadmap, even if it's a rubbish roadmap, there's always a roadmap. I think most people know what it is, but if you don't, find out, because you're not really going to get very far until you do that. Get to know it, ask questions. If there's not enough detail, ask for more detail. Product managers really like being asked about the roadmap because it's their pride and joy. It's kind of the summary of all their hard work. They toil over these analytics and this user feedback and this kind of business direction and all these great ideas, and they all come together, get shuffled around, and out pops a roadmap, hopefully. So I think if you ask a product manager about the roadmap and they don't want to talk about it, then something's really wrong. And I guess the other thing is, ask why and challenge it. If you think something shouldn't be on it, or if you think something should be on it that's not on it, tell the product manager or tell the person who owns it. I think it's a good thing. I wish developers in my team now and in past teams that I've been in did that more. It's good for me to be challenged. I might disagree with them, and I think that's fine. I might agree with them. That's even better, I guess. But I think it's a good thing. I think asking why and challenging the person who's making these decisions is a really positive thing. I can't promise it'll always go well, though. Like, not all product managers are good product managers. It's like anything in life, they're human. So the next one, metrics. I alluded to this on the roadmap. Get near to them. If you're interested in products, look at numbers. Don't just kind of make assumptions. I think that's an incredibly frustrating thing for me as a product manager to see in developers that I work with. You can be a great developer, but if you're making assumptions that inform the decisions you take when you build something, it can be really dangerous. Get some data. It's always there. Some companies do it more than others, so it might not always be there, but it should be. Use numbers or qualitative data, which is obviously the opposite. So, words and pictures perhaps. Mix the two together, go for the one that's easiest, the most relevant, but find out why things are happening and to what degree. You're probably not going to get very far challenging someone about the roadmap unless you have numbers or something other than your opinion to back it up, unless you're the CEO, and that's it's kind of their privilege, but really they've probably got the numbers, they just might not look like it. I think you might be in a horrible situation where you've got someone who's saying, right, no, not listening to you, it's my decision, and they're not basing it on data. That's probably a terrible place to be. But I think it's like such an important part of doing the product role. It's kind of your second brain almost. Like it's you just have to rely on this thing to help you make your judgments, because otherwise you'll start going off on tangents that could be completely disastrous for the company or yourself, or if you're the owner. I wrote the word before at the top there. Metrics are really important when you're planning and putting stuff on a roadmap, and after as well. So after is kind of different, because I think something you've built and you then go and measure it. So it's perhaps a little bit less scattergun, it's a bit more focused, but equally important, and it also powers the roadmap. So you build something, you hopefully are interested in how it's performing. So do it, do that more. I think an interesting thing to add here, this is something that is usually like pushing an open door. Developers love stats. I think if you're technically inclined, it's generally the case that you like data and know how to find it and process it to a degree. Product managers generally don't have as many technical skills as developers. So if developers come to them and say, look, I've found this data, I want to help build this stuff up and give you this insight and work with you on it, it's going to be like pushing an open door, and it's going to make you a much more effective team. The other thing I was going to mention, and again, this was I was sort of judging how to pitch this, but some of the tools that we could use to do this. This might be just like teaching you to suck eggs, but an insight into how we work at Bloom and Wild. We use the obvious ones, or I think they're obvious, like Google Analytics, and obviously our database that's full of exciting data. But things like Mixpanel, user testing, the whole range. Like we kind of are quite lean because we're small and young, but I think you can go to town, and there's all sorts of tools that will help you find the data that you need. And it's a case of picking the right one most of the time is the sort of biggest challenge, because there are so many. You could spend your whole life kind of running around in circles. But number 4, hopefully. Sorry, I tactically added in animated GIFs to this afternoon when my team told me that it was too black and white and boring. So sorry. I keep forgetting to press the button. They do have a sort of coy meaning. What's that one? Reward for the team. That was the bit that I hadn't mentioned. Sorry. Yeah. So data's great, because if it's going well and you prove it's going well, everyone's happy, and it's like a cat high five. Next one. Get to know the customers. And actually, of most of the places that I've worked as a product manager, developers more than most people seem to really value the customer view. I don't know why particularly. I mean, I think it's a good thing, right? I'm not sort of questioning the value of it. but more than teams, the teams that you have like marketing, operations, I'm not going to suggest which ones I think are good or bad, other than that I think developers generally are really good at this. They want to know what the customer is doing with the thing they've built, and I think the more we do that, the better. It's a really, really good thing. It's an extra pair of ears and eyes on the sort of outside world that's informing the stuff that you build in the future. So knowing how it's used, what works, doesn't work. I guess the next one's a bit of a luxury if you happen to have a bit of spare time, which I don't think anyone ever does, but it might be a way to sort of find new ideas and opportunities that you didn't even know existed. Like if you hear listening to customer calls and they're talking about something that just isn't even on the roadmap or isn't even in the product, that could be something that you get from there. Again, I kind of alluded to tools, but I think this is probably a little bit obvious. I think one thing that actually is worth mentioning, at Bloom and Wild, we always listen to customer calls. And when I say we, I mean the whole team. So there's 25 of us across all disciplines, 9 tech and the rest marketing, operations, etc. And obviously a customer services team who do that full time. At some point each week, we all spend at least an hour doing some kind of engagement with customers, whether it's answering emails or being on the phone. I think everyone has taken a call at some point, which is easier and harder for some people. I quite struggled with that. I joined Bloom and Wild, didn't know anything about flowers, and had to talk to little old ladies about roses and peonies, and I didn't know what to do. So I found emails easier, but whatever way it is, I think it's something that is really worth championing as a product manager. And as a developer, if you say to someone, look, I want to know more about what the customers are saying, it's a really good thing. That one's not animated. That's a dog and one of our flower boxes. That's what our customers do with our flower boxes. They kind of take photos of them when they land on the doorstep. It's an interesting observation. It's not influenced our tech yet, but yeah, we'll see. This one, get to know the problems. And this is kind of flowing on from the customers bit and the kind of data bit. When you've got all this data and you're sort of hearing all this feedback, think about what are the things that are actually stopping people from either having a good experience or maybe even stopping them from using your product. It could be, something like say a button is broken on a website and that stops you ordering. I mean, that's not going to happen because that's a major one. Someone would find that, but something that stops people actually using your product is really bad, and it's an obvious problem. So, identify it and list it. That's I think internally and externally, you can have problems that you can find out about and potentially help solve as a technologist. Whether it's processes that are going too slowly or have too much manual effort going into them, it can be all sorts of things. And as a developer, you're in probably the most powerful position to be able to solve these things. Tech businesses, their whole kind of business is digital, and if the digital thing has problems in it. Oh, sorry, not yet. If there are problems, developers are the people that end up fixing them. So if you can help identify them, it's a really positive thing. I guess from a business point of view, which I'm always aligned with the UX and tech more than the business, it's a good thing because things move faster and people are happy. And at the end of the day, the business that you work for, whether it's your own or someone else's, is not going to do well unless it moves quickly and becomes successful. So, whether you like cold hard numbers or not, you sort of have to acknowledge them, and it's a big part of what you do. The other thing that I would add here, and the reason I keep sort of banging on about problems, is our roadmap is really a series of problems, and it's sort of loosely based on this sort of theory or approach to working called jobs to be done. We don't follow any processes religiously at Bloom and Wild. We're too small for that. We just kind of have to muck in and get stuff done in the most logical way possible. But this idea of focusing on things to solve rather than, I'm going to build this feature or I'm going to do this other thing, works really well for us because we have to be focused and we have to do things really quickly and efficiently. The next one is kind of similar but different, subtly different. If you have problems, a big list of problems to solve on the backlog or a wish, essentially wherever you store this kind of to-do list, when you actually come to work on it, focusing on it is really important, and it can really damage your kind of impact as a developer if you don't. Like, everyone has their passion, absolutely, and I think that's really important. Whether it's, these cats can move. Whether it's CSS, as a front ender, whether it's JavaScript, whether whatever element of development it is that your passion is, it's worth remembering that actually you're solving a problem, because you can go to town, build these beautiful frameworks. You can make things consistent. Whatever the thing is that you really want to do, isn't actually going to help the customers sometimes. It's a big challenge, I think, and I struggle with it as much as anyone. I think it's just, it's a really good skill to have, and it's something that is really worth working on if you're interested in product and being more product focused. The way to approach it that works for me is have things that are clear problems. I just mentioned our backlog is really a series of things to solve or things to tick off, or things to solve, things to conquer. And if they're clear, that helps you to focus. It's, I guess, a sort of very lightweight version of having a spec. And if they're clear, they're testable. All the hypotheses that you kind of form to solve them are hopefully testable. Ultimately, it's about scope. I think if you let the scope creep, you think things are harder to test, things take longer to build, and ultimately your product suffers from it, because the longer it takes you to build something and actually get it in front of a customer, the less impact it has. The next one, I mentioned business. Get to know the business. You have to be bought into it. I think you can have your own agenda and your own interests, but ultimately the thing you're building is for someone, whether it's for yourself or for another business. What are the goals of it? Where's it going? Find out what the sort of number, whether it's number goals or something aspirational like, we want to go to the moon next month. Why has stuff been planned? Who does what? Who's doing it? Why is it a marketing thing? Is it a operations thing? I think in bigger organisations, this is probably more of a problem. I think at Bloom and Wild, there's 25 of us. There is absolutely no way people will not know what our goal is, because we talk about it every day together. If you're in a big place like cancer research where there's 5,000 people, it can be really difficult to know actually what are the big goals, where are we all going, and be nearer the numbers. Ultimately, if you've got goals, they should have numbers attached to them. Sometimes they don't, which can make it hard. But if there are numbers, then get near to them, pay attention to them, see how you're doing. And which ones are you moving specifically? So I'm going to use Bloom and Wild as an example, because that's really all I can think about at the moment, for obvious reasons. It soaks up lots of my time. We want to sell more flowers. That's a very vague goal. I think an individual person working on an individual task is going to find it very hard to relate to that as a very big goal. But we can do a whole load of little things along the way. That's not a moving cat, is it? No. We can do a whole load of little things along the way that make it easier to do lots of flowers. We can make our supply chain slicker. We can make our website work faster. We can make our app load quicker. We can reduce friction in the conversion funnel. We can make our homepage look nicer and more friendly. We can make it work on more devices. We can make it more supportable so that we can evolve it faster and adapt to stuff. Like, there are so many little goals in there that add up to sell more flowers. So think about the ones that that relate to you, and just keep an eye on them and make sure you're actually moving them, because I think if you're not, it's probably quite demotivating. Number 8, next one. What's the best or the right solution? I couldn't decide what the best word was there, or the right word, so I chose both. When you're solving a problem or building a thing, there's usually many ways you can do it. Sometimes there's not, but generally there is. The amount of time it takes, the amount of effort, the quality of the thing. Is it an MVP or is it a polished thing? Is it going to go out in phases, or are you going to build it and then that's it? It's going to be like that forever. And that's all really adds up to being the context. And make decisions, take into account all of those things. I think as a product manager, one of the things you do all the time is juggle those and kind of judge, right, what is the thing that I need to build right now? Is it going to be a skeleton, or is it going to be something that's really polished? Sometimes an MVP does need to be polished. Your homepage on a website probably needs to look really good. You can't just put out a skeleton, but a little feature that you're trying out on a small proportion of users perhaps doesn't need to be so flashy and beautiful. Don't be precious, and I think everyone can be precious. Everyone wants to be precious about their own area, whether it's UX, whether it's JavaScript, whether it's product management even, whether it's the roadmap. Does the roadmap need to look pixel perfect and have little capital letters in the right places, and does it need to have the right fonts? Like, not always, no, and in fact probably never. Sometimes be precious when it's important. The numbers in the roadmap probably need to be bang on, and the priority needs to be right. You can apply that across whatever your precious thing is, but I think having the pragmatism to know when to be precious and when not to be is a really important skill. And as a product manager, I find that's something that I have to do all the time. And it leads into the next word that I've put there, which is empathy, and appreciating other people's sort of precious thing. Because if someone, you might upset someone by saying, well, no, sorry, you cannot spend 4 months putting this new CSS framework into our technology stack at the moment, because actually it's not going to help the customers with the problem that they have. The person who loves the CSS is not going to like that. So you have to kind of have appreciation for that and find a way to deal with it that isn't going to make them walk out the door, because that would be even worse. I think that's probably the hardest bit of the job that I've found from doing it. People are unpredictable, they're humans, you can't always tell how they feel, you can't always tell what the precious thing is actually if they don't tell you. So I think balancing those two things and figuring out what's the best solution, whether it's the solution technically or the solution in how to deal with the situation, is really challenging. I've been alluding to this one sort of gradually more as I've gone through, and I really didn't know what to put as a title here without sort of sounding like a kind of graduate scheme awful person, which is not what I was intending. But the people bit of the job, I think, is the thing that really makes a product manager different from someone that's more focused on their trade as either designer or developer. I'm not saying that as a developer you don't have people skills, like absolutely you do. What I'm saying is you're going to have to use them a lot more if you start working as a product person. You actually can't avoid it. I think everything you do involves people, and you may end up doing a bit of people and a bit of your trade still, but probably the people bit is going to be the bit that really gets you the wins. You need to get stuff done, and you can't do it on your own. Maybe you can to start with, but ultimately that will have there'll be a shelf life for that, and it will stop. So you therefore need to find other people to work with you, whether it's people that are going to deploy your code, whether it's people that are going to QA it, whether it's people that are going to help figure out what the best solution is and actually get the customers using it, so operational type stuff. Getting those things all working together is pretty tricky, and I think you need to have the right skills to be able to deal with people to do that. Patience as well, I think, is a really important skill, and another one that I struggle with. I think instant gratification is definitely my style. If I was going to be a photographer, I'd use Polaroid rather than film, sort of traditional film. But I think you can't always get things done straight away. You might think, I can do this on my own right now, I'm going to do all of the things. That's not scalable. You need to accept that perhaps it won't take as long, that someone's got to do something else first. There's numerous situations where patience becomes a really, really big part of your job. That little GIF is cat herding, which I thought was just better explained visually than me trying to inarticulately describe the other element of what I do every day. There are lots of cats, even at a small startup, and cats don't herd. They just go where they want, unless you find some way of encouraging them to all go in the same direction. They're nuts, aren't they? It's nuts. Okay, the final one, and this sounds really cheesy, and when I talked through these slides with the guys in my team earlier, I kind of got them to proofread them for me, and they absolutely tore me to pieces. One of them kindly gave me this GIF. Oh, no, sorry, wrong way. Not the cats. Which I thought was quite cute, and I asked him actually which one's the product manager and which one's the developer. He said, actually I'll let you imagine which one's which. Make friends with your product manager, or a product manager if you don't have one, is my last kind of bit of advice. They're doing the job. They might tell you don't come near it, it's absolutely horrible. or they might give you some advice that inspires you, or they might give you some tips for how to get into it. I think anyone else who stood up here and did the same kind of presentation would tell you a whole stack of different stuff. They might say a few of the same things, but there's so many different elements to it that you kind of have to apply it in the place that you are. So I would say go and make friends with your PM or a PM in the place that you work. The other thing they laughed at me about earlier was when you look at that list, it actually looks like a kind of instruction guide for stalkers. I don't suggest you do all of those things on one person at one time. Maybe pick the one that's most appropriate. Some people like being asked, some people don't. Some people would prefer you to perhaps just follow around and keep an eye on them, listen in, ask lots of questions, ask how you can help. Like, figure out which one's the best one. But I think if you do some of those, you'll learn a lot very quickly and hopefully get nearer to the product. And if your thing is wanting to be a product manager, then I think that's the best place to start. The health warning that goes with that, and this is a great GIF, is bear in mind they're busy. They're always busy. That may mean that they're snappy and they don't want to talk to you. May mean that they, the things that I just talked about, cat herding, all the different things you coordinate, stakeholders, whatever you want to call it, they're really busy. So appreciate that, and don't expect them to have hours and hours and hours. They might do what that cat does. The next thing, they rely on your help. Like if you're in a team and you have a product manager in that team and you're a developer in that team or a designer or whatever other role, they really rely on you. Like, don't underestimate that. You can't, as a product manager, you can't get anywhere without the rest of the team doing their thing. So be excellent at what you do. Still be excellent at what you do. Keep being excellent, and then offer to take on more responsibility, because it's not going to work if you kind of drop the day job too soon. It might sound really obvious, but and the last one, I sort of made this point earlier, but the softer skills bit, the patience, the people bit, I think is the hardest bit, and I was really rubbish at it a few years ago. I'm still not amazing at it. I don't think I'm anywhere near perfect, but I think if there's one thing I've learned and grown at in the past 2 years, it's that bit. You can be an amazing UX designer or a great developer or a great business person, and you can keep refining those skills. But the thing that will really make you win and actually get stuff done, get decisions made, which ultimately mean the thing gets shipped and becomes a success, etc., is the softer bit. I'm utterly convinced. But if someone had said that to me a couple of years ago, I probably would have laughed at them and smirked and said, "No, go home." So, yeah. And that's it. That's 10 things that I would suggest doing to get nearer to product. Very open to challenge. I think it's incredibly subjective. I think it's different in every place you work, but yeah, hopefully interesting. I did have one sort of cheeky last slide, which is the obvious one, that we are looking for more developers. So come and talk to me about that as well as product, but mainly about product. So, thanks.